Hello, this is Laura Dovalo, and I'm thrilled to be a guest designer for Penguin Palace this month. Today I'm going to show you how to make this interactive card featuring a cute stamp set called The More We Get Together. When we pull the tab, the seal shows us its thumb, and at the same time the blowfish moves downwards. I started by creating an underwater scene with a bunch of the cute stamps, which I then covered with little masks, fussy cut out of masking paper. To protect the color on those more complicated shapes, I just applied a layer of glossy accents to them. I'm using chipped sapphire, broken china, and tumbled glass distress ink to do some soft blending on the background, but you can of course choose your own favorite combo for this. If you have a suitable stencil, you can use it to add some waves to the upper third of the panel, but if you don't, you can easily create one with two wide strips of washi tape adhered to a piece of release paper. Just grab a pair of scissors and cut waves on one edge and scallops on the other one. Get rid of some of the stickiness by rubbing your homemade stencil against the back of your hand before you adhere it to your panel, and continue ink blending until you're happy with the result. Carefully peel off your stencil and work on the sky with the lightest ink, in my case tumbled glass distress ink. Next you can use the other edge of the stencil to add some extra waves to the ocean. Finally, you can splatter a little bit of water all over the background for some nice texture. We don't want our ink to smear, so keep some kitchen paper close by to absorb those droplets. And once the panel is dry, you can peel off the masks. As you can see, to save some time, I colored my scene beforehand off camera, but there's a list of Copic markers that I used, as well as all of the measurements for this card in the description box below. Okay, now we need to stamp our main character, the seal, separating its arm from the body. Let's start with the arm. Just cover the rest of the stamp with washi tape before inking it with some Copic friendly ink. Today I'm using Tuxedo Black Memento ink. Then we need to peel off the washi tape, stamp, and draw the missing part. First with a pencil and then with a black pen. I end the arm with a little circle so that I can glue it to the rotating mechanism later on. Now let's do the same thing with the body, but this time covering the arm. Then inking, getting rid of the washi tape, stamping, and drawing the missing line. There we go. Off camera, I colored and die cut the seal with the matching die, of course snipping off the extra pieces with my scissors, but I didn't quite like the way the arm looked with that white outline all over. Also, the arm was a little bit too long with those extra lines above the thumb, so I decided to fussy cut both elements. And every time you fussy cut a stamp, it's a good idea to color the edges with a black marker. I'm using the Memento Tuxedo Black Dual marker for this, but any black marker that doesn't bleed will work. I stamped and die cut the complete seal to use as a reference, and now I'm just figuring out where the arm should go so that it stays hidden behind the seal's body until we pull the pull tab. I'm going to use a piercing tool to punch a hole in the center of the circle, and I'll press hard enough so that it also pierces the seal. Now onto the mechanism itself. We're going to need a couple of strips of heavyweight paper. The largest one is for our pull tab, and it should measure 2 by 6 inches, scored at 1 inch so that we can fold it in half lengthwise. Let's apply some liquid glue and press firmly with a bone folder to make it really sturdy. We will also need 2 pieces of heavyweight cardstock for our connectors. I started out with a larger piece that measures 1 by 1.5 and a smaller square piece, but later on you'll see that we need it to be slightly bigger, so go ahead and make it 1 by 1.25. Fold them in half, glue them, and punch holes about 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch from the edges. You can use the first hole as a guide to punch the rest of them. After that, you can grab some scissors and a nail file to round the corners. And don't worry, they definitely don't have to be perfect, since they're gonna stay hidden behind our main panel. If you own a corner jumper or something similar, you can also round the corners of the pull tab, but this is totally optional. And if you have a small stamp with the word pull, go ahead and stamp it now. It's time to plan our card so that we can create the mechanism for it. I forgot to zoom out the camera for this step, but the main parts are still visible. Okay, our pull tab is going to be located 5/8 of an inch from the right edge of the panel, and it's going to move the blowfish up and down. So we need to cut a slit about 3 inches from the upper edge and 1 1/8 from the right edge. Go ahead and use a craft knife to cut a straight slit that measures 1.5 inches. Let's move on to the seal. I placed it around 5/8 of an inch from the left edge of the panel, and then I used the hole that I pierced earlier as a guide to pierce my main panel. This is where the arm will be located, but as I said earlier, our mechanism will be hidden, so we need to die cut a hole that measures 1/2 inch in diameter to access it. If you have a long reach hole punch, use that instead. Or you could also use a craft knife. Before we assemble our mechanism, we need to do a couple of things. First, we have to punch a hole in our pull tab so that we can link our connectors to each other and to the pull tab. Place it like it'll be in its starting position, 5/8 of an inch from the right edge and about 1/2 inch sticking out from the lower edge of the panel. I don't know the exact placement of this hole, but it's about 7/8 of an inch from the upper edge and 1/4 of an inch from the left edge. It doesn't have to be super exact since the mechanism is flexible. I want you to understand it so that you can adapt it to other future cards and not get lost with so many measurements. As you can see, I'm now linking the connectors to each other and to the pull tab with some mini brads. I also ended up rounding the corners of the other edge, although it wasn't really necessary. Okay, I promise you we're almost done. We could assemble our mechanism directly to the card base, but I find it a lot easier to use a second same-sized panel for this. Stack both of them and pierce a hole in the center of the circle. Here's where we'll link our connectors. Now you can trace a line 5/8 of an inch from the right edge of the secondary panel so that you'll know where to adhere the foam tape to keep your pull tab in place. I did some editing to shorten this tutorial, and here I've already added a little bit of foam tape, but before adding more we can link the smallest connector to the mechanism panel with a third mini brad. See how smoothly it moves. With a smaller sized connector, the range of motion would have been reduced and the seal's arm wouldn't have rotated far enough. You'll understand this in a moment, but first let me show you what I'm going to use to adhere the seal's arm to the rotating mechanism. I use these 1/8 of an inch thick foam dots that measure a little less than 1/2 inch in diameter. I punch a hole in the center of them with a 1/4 of an inch hole punch. But if you don't have this, you can just use a bunch of small slivers that you can adhere around the brad. Let's adhere one to the rotating brad to test the rotation of the arm before we move on. Okay, it definitely has my seal of approval. To adhere the blowfish to our pull tab, we will need a couple of mini strips of thin printer paper. Mine are 5/16 of an inch wide. We just have to fold them in half and wrap them around the slit in the main panel. Next, we'll glue a little circle to the back and later on some foam squares to the front. We can now finish adding the foam tape to our mechanism panel. I'm drawing a line around the mechanism with a white gel pen so that I know to avoid these areas. I grabbed the main panel and started adhering it to the secondary panel, but luckily I remembered that I needed to add some thin foam tape to the back of the sliding element, and I was able to do that with my tweezers just in time. My camera ran out of battery when I was adhering the panel to the card base and I didn't notice. I used double-sided tape and avoided applying it to the back of the brad prongs. The card base measures 8 3/4 by 6 5/8, scored at 4 3/8. I also used my scissors to trim the secondary panel all around so that you couldn't see it even when looking at the card from the side. Now that our main character is adhered, let's add the rest of the details and finish the card. I love the cute little blowfish, or maybe it's a catfish, I hadn't thought of that. It seems to be moving nicely as well. I like using enamel triangles or arrows in my interactive cards, and I have a bunch of them in my stash. The only thing that's missing is the sentiment, which I heat embossed in white on 2 strips of the same blue cardstock that I used for the pull tab. I'll spare you a couple of minutes of me adhering them to the panel and show you a couple of pictures of the finished card instead. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial and will give this interactive card a try. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be happy to answer them. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and thank you so much for watching. Bye bye!